Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and we're here at the Madera branch of the wonderful Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County with Lieutenant Colonel Richard Dubell, retired U.S. Air Force, and of course when he first went in it was called the U.S. Air Corps, the Army Air Corps. But Mr. Dubell lives here in Madera, and we're very honored to have the opportunity to speak with him this afternoon for the Library of Congress program of oral history. And Dick, it's a great honor to meet you, sir, and to finally get together, having talked with you a couple of times. And tell us where you were born.
Well, I guess that's a good place to start. I was born on January 3rd, 1916, in the front bedroom of our home at 3620 Edwards Road. It's in Hyde Park in Cincinnati. And went to St. Mary's grade school, sang in the choir and all that stuff, and at about age 10, 11, 12, my brother and I took over the operation of the concession stand at the Hyde Park Tennis Club.
Oh my.
And so we sold items of drink and coffee and balls and towels, which we had to launder ourselves and bring back at that time. And of course we learned a little tennis too.
Good.
We were able to see some of the old stars like Bill Tilden and George Lott and
Wow.
a few others. I became a fairly good tennis player and played on the tennis team at Purcell High School, where I graduated in 1934.
Now, when you got into high school, Purcell was then located where?
Where it is.
It's still there. I mean, that was the original location.
That's the original Purcell High School.
Okay.
Which was started just, it was started in late 29, I built. And so 30, 34, I guess we were about the first class that went through 4 years.
Oh, yes.
There. And as I say, I played on the tennis team there. I played against Bill Talbert and a few of the others. And
Right.
fortunately, was good enough to make it to go to Columbus, Ohio for the playoffs. But,
State championships?
For the state, yes. And after that, well, as you know, those were the Great Depression years where I grew up. And
So you were in the class of 34, is that it?
that is class of 34. And so after we graduated, I had a few special jobs and went to a business school for a few weeks to get special training. And then I was employed by the Western Bank and Trust Company, which was the old Western German Bank at 12th and Vine Street. And that was quite an experience there. During that time, I went to the University of Cincinnati Night School, business ad for 5 years. And
Did you co-op? Did they have the co-op program?
They had it, but I was not in day school. I was working in the day.
Oh, that's
I
right.
went to night school.
That's right.
Some of my buddies were going in day school and
Right.
met frequently with them, all of which were very patriotic and ready to go when the call came. One good friend of mine, Jim Hughes, and he was about the same size as I was. We went to the Naval Air recruiting group, and they said we were too small for the pilot training or something. And then we went to the Army, and they said, that was the beginning of the Flying Cadet Program.
Yes.
And that program was supposedly based on the training type that was given at West Point. And, we applied and were accepted, except you were supposed to have so many college credits. And my nighttime college credits plus my American Institute of Banking, they did not think qualified. So a couple of us, 2 or 3 of us, my friends, went to a special schooling and took a special examination which covered physics, geometry, history, and the test itself lasted 3 days. Later we're told that we passed and were accepted, and I went into flying training.
Where was this now?
Now, the first place was at, hold
Texas?
get my list over there. Oh, so the training started at Greider Field, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and we were the 2nd or 3rd class at that field. The people in Pine Bluff and nearby were very friendly to us and helped out. We then went to to Gowan Field in San Angelo, Texas.
Goodfellow Field, yeah.
Goodfellow Field.
That was for basic.
For basic training. And it was there on December the 7th that we were told that Hawaii had been bombed and that we were going to war. They shut everything down. No one could leave. The next day they brought in a bunch of old WW1 guns and said, well, you got to clean them up. They'd been in Cosmoline for years and years. So it took us a couple of weeks to even get the things clean enough for our inspector.
Cosmoline was terrible stuff. Thick and gooey. And
it was awful.
It was a preservative.
And so our commanding officer was a West Point graduate, and he had the white glove type of treatment, and we had one heck of a time. We ended up taking the guns and everything into the shower and turning the shower and soaping them and trying to get them clean to pass that white glove test. But then we went on to advanced training at
Foster Field, Victoria,
Foster Field in Victoria, Texas. And that base was set up primarily as a advanced training base for fighter pilot training. And we all thought we were great fighter pilots. And it had gunnery, air-to-air, air-to-ground, so on. And on one of the training missions on an air-to-ground maneuver, my roommate didn't pull out fast enough, and the tail of his plane hit into the water, and he was killed. But my instructor was kind of a character guy, and we also were learning flight training and formation training, and he would take us through those billowy white.
Well, there you were in Victoria. How long were these programs, like basic? Several months?
Oh yes, in fact, I think in there it tells you that
okay.
we were in the class of 42D, which was in April of 1942 when we finished. We started in 1941. And
Right.
so on April the 29th, 1942, we graduated, and were commissioned second lieutenants and pilots, and we were looking forward to going to a fighter training base. But somehow they picked out a number of us, and we ended up driving to Sebring, Florida, where we saw this huge thing flying overhead and thought, that's too big to fly. And then we found out that's what we were training in, when it was 4-inch transition bombing, which was the old B-17Bs.
Flying Fortress.
And we had, I don't know, a month or so there. Then we were sent to MacDill Field in Tampa, Florida, where we were supposed to be forming into groups, but we never had enough aircraft for the number of people that were being trained. And then MacDill Field, they decided they were going to send us to Boise, Idaho. And what that field was called, I don't know. Anyway, as I say, there were only about 4 to 6 B-17s that we had to train this whole group. And for some reason, I was picked to fly one of them up there. And of course, we got there long before the ground crews and everything got there. And were told one day that some general came through and said that he wanted to know why the aircraft were on the ground. We should be flying them training. So he wanted us to fly the planes day and night. It got so that, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we didn't have enough pilots to do that all the time. So I had a great first sergeant, and he was our engineer and maintenance man, and turned out to be a good co-pilot. And so he and I flew together a number of times without anybody else. And
just the two of you in that big plane.
Right. And
wow.
And also at night, and I don't think the Air Force ever knew about all that, but
that's amazing. Because you said that the normal crew of a B-17 was 10 men.
10 men, yeah. But we flew up and down the valley and then through the mountains there. And then they start forming, I guess at that time, the 303rd Bomb Group. And we were then sent to a field in El Paso, Texas, and started training missions there and formed crews. And again, for some reason, I was picked out and sent with it was then Captain Marion to take the ground troops and whatnot over to Europe. And I think it says I went at a certain date, I don't know, recall.
One pause here, let me ask you this question. You have on here Adjutant General School at Fort Oglethorpe. What was that about?
That was later on.
Oh, okay, that's later on.
After I came back.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. So you were with Captain Marion.
And yes, and went to New Jersey and then boarded the Queen Mary and took all the ground troops and everything along with a bunch of other groups to England and landed at the Firth of Forth in Scotland, and the Red Cross met us with the hot dog, hot cocoa, hot coffee.
Now, was that, that's interesting, you talk about the Queen Mary, of course that was the first one, And she was a very huge liner and a very fast liner. Did that sail unescorted, or did?
Yes, because I figured it was fast
Fast
enough and
enough.
whatnot, and that was a very funny trip because it zigzagged a lot.
Right.
You could be sitting there in the foyer and go sliding all the way across to the other side
Right.
and back. So
Very, very common maneuver, yeah.
they did have a couple of alarms, but evidently it wasn't enough.
Right.
So we made it without any trouble.
So there you were in jolly old Scotland, huh?
Yes, and then we moved down to Molesworth, England, at an old RAF base, where we set up shop, and again, as an aide to Colonel Major Marion at that time, I guess. I was picked to do a lot of odd jobs. He sent me to the RAF Air Sea Rescue headquarters for me to learn how that operated so that I could give that information to the crews when they came over. I then came back and he said I should take over the operation of the flying tower and airfield. They made me aerodrome officer, so I was in command of the whole operation there.
This was still at Molesworth?
This is in Molesworth. And along with that, I was doing as operations officer for headquarters. In the interim of all this following, I again flew missions, although I no longer had my own crew, so that I selected a crew, and outside of the first few missions, I flew in the lead plane as lead command pilot of the group on most all the missions I flew. Fortunately, we got shot up a bit, but I wasn't hurt, only I think on one mission, a navigator lost his little finger. A piece of flak came right through the table and hit him. And another time I had observer Major General Williams, who was standing in the cockpit after one of the runs, and we got quite a bit of flak damage and could not close the bomb bays, and it cut out the hydraulic system. So I asked after some communication with the crew that they said a couple of them were hit in the back. So I forgot about the bomb bay doors not being closed. I turned to the general and asked him if he could go back and see how the guys were. And then I got thinking afterwards, wouldn't that be something if I came back and they said, what happened to the general?
Good
And he fell through the bomb bay. There was a track about a foot half wide that you walked through there. And he was a rotund fellow. But we made it. And,
I bet he felt very fortunate. Well, now, your first bombing run, for example, what was that in 1943?
42.
42.
43.
43. Okay.
Yes, yes.
And how?
As we got there in September 42.
Okay. What was your first target?
I don't recall.
You don't recall that? That would have probably been in France, wouldn't it?
Well, there were a number of them in France,
Yeah.
but primarily the missions I flew were in Germany.
Germany.
And whatnot. On one mission, we lost 40 aircraft. That's 10 apiece. That's 4,400.
Just imagine, just 400. Yeah.
400
Men.
men.
Oh my goodness.
On another mission to Leipzig, where we made rerun toward the target, and a lot of planes ran out of gas coming back. We dropped 60 planes on that mission. Many of those were run out of gas and landed in the channel.
Those were all...
And they floated very well after they were empty.
Yeah, right.
And
those were all bombers,
all
not
B-17s.
fighters too.
No,
My goodness.
There were approximately 1,400 B-17s made, 14,000, and 4,000 of them were lost
Just imagine.
in battle.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
actually, when I look back, and I don't have the figures for this, but on our original group going over, there were approximately 200 pilots, including the different squadrons. There were 4 squadrons and the headquarters personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And of those original 200, I think I'm one of 27 that survived.
Is that so?
And
Oh my goodness.
so it was nothing when we went on a mission that we'd lose 1 or
Oh my
2 or
goodness.
something.
What were the main enemy planes that you encountered?
Well, they said they were going to give us air support, and the RAF tried that. But by the time we formed and got across the channel, and the RAF went over there with us, they were running low on fuel and had to come back. So as soon as they left, we were faced with Herman Goring's yellow-nosed Focke-Wulf
Mm-hmm.
and some ME-109s later on.
Schmidt, yeah.
And it was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the one thing, the B-17s were in group formation were supposed to have so much firepower that they thought we would be able to combat the enemy aircraft. But those enemy guys were pretty tricky too.
Yes.
And I can remember a couple of times one of them going by, I could see him sitting in the cockpit. He was that close to us. And so what was the main thing? Flak was absolutely terrible in some places. The thing that...
Can you describe for your future viewers, what was flak? Is that something that was shot up and then exploded in the air?
That is true. And
Okay.
it was based on the elevation of the flights and so on. We flew in groups, one following the other, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the flak ahead of you. You knew that was where the target that we were going to bomb was, and that we were going to fly right through that mess. And which we did, we had to. And fortunately, sometimes they were a little off elevation, but that was a lot of damage done in that area.
Well, this, I was not in Europe, but I've read so much about it, of course, and one of the things that has always stuck in my mind is the experience of the enemy pilots. They had much more experience than our men did because they'd been fighting much longer. Some of them had fought in the Spanish Civil War.
Well, these pilots that, of the fighters that met us were experienced.
Yes.
They were the elite of the Luftwaffe. And at one time, one of those pilots were captured and brought back to England, and I was with a group that interviewed him, and he spoke perfect English. He went to all the best schools, but as the war wore on, these good old pilots were being eliminated too.
Right.
And so the younger ones were not quite as experienced as maybe our boys were
Right.
later on. And when we did get the fighters over there, we had some P-38s and P-47s groups. They did quite well and were very helpful.
Did you ever encounter any of the Tuskegee Airmen?
No, it did not. I knew they were there, but
Yeah.
I never saw them, and I know of them. But I did have one experience with coming back from one of the missions where we were shot up quite a bit, and I was coming in on 2 engines, and we were looking for some place to land because I asked the navigator to pick out the first field that looked like we could land. And so we did, and we landed at this, it turned out to be an RAF Polish fighter group.
Oh.
And we landed safely there. They came out and greeted us, treated us like we were kings. They said, we just love you guys. You're big friends. When you go up, the Germans come up and we shoot them down. And the Poles were, it was a very enlightening experience.
I'm sure.
They gave us a party, and
yeah, the Polish portion of the Royal Air Force was quite amazing, and that's something a lot of people don't know anything about.
they were a bunch of go-get-ems.
Yeah. Well, now, as you were in combat and you're making your bombing runs, kind of describe what you had to concentrate on, and with the enemy coming at you at the same time.
Well, you had to disregard the enemy coming at you.
There we are.
There was a point where you hit and had to go towards a target. At that point, you had to fly straight and level, try to get the group to be together, and turn it over to the bombardier. The Norden bomb site actually connected and flew the plane and kept it straight and level until he hit the drop front. And at that point, we pulled up and turned off target as quickly as we could. We tore our ass out of the place to get away from the flak.
How much tonnage did you carry in bombs?
Well, normally we carried 4,000 pounds.
A couple of tons.
2, 4, 6. We were up 6,000,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the size and what we were dropping,
Right.
and then how much fuel we had to carry.
You mentioned Leipzig. What other cities did you fly over?
I didn't fly over them, we bombed.
I mean, you bombed them.
I guess you can name most all the big targets.
Dresden, Berlin.
We were the first to bomb Berlin in the daylight. I was on that mission with Colonel Lyle, the guy you saw in that one picture.
Right.
And I bombed Bremen, Bremerhaven, Leipzig,
Hamburg.
Hamburg, the ball bearing factory, which we
Right.
hit 2 or 3 times.
Right. Yeah, those manufacturing plants in Germany were very important to eliminate as quickly as you could.
Yes. And they guarded them as well as they could.
Yes.
But I remember on one mission to the ball bearing factory, we were the low group, and coming back, and the Luftwaffe were down to, I guess, the last planes they had to fly up, and they were all Ju-75,
The Junkers.
Younger, the shot 20 millimeter shells, but they never could get close enough behind us to hurt any of us. So,
Well, I know that remarkable Boeing aircraft, the B-17, and the different versions of it, of course, pretty well armored.
well, yes, the old B-17E, which we started out with, had two 50 caliber guns in the top turret, two 50 caliber machine guns in the ball turret, 50 caliber machine gun on each side in the waist, and two in the tail gunner's position. That pretty much covered it. Then later on they put some 50 caliber up in the nose part of the plane,
Oh, yeah.
for the navigator or bombardier to shoot. And the later models even had a little nose turret that was operated from inside that shot two 50 calibers.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
That was, no wonder they called her a flying fortress.
yeah. We did a lot of damage. We shot down a lot of planes.
I'm sure. And you wound up with how many missions now?
I flew 35 missions.
35.
Mine were spread out, though, as I mentioned, as being operations officer. And I flew most always with the lead crew, which was selected as being the best at their job. But I did not fly every mission that came up.
No.
And so it was over a period of years or so, where some new crews come over, they'd only be there for a few months maybe.
Wasn't there supposed to be a limit that you would be rotated out after?
Yes, there was.
Like 20 or 25 or something?
But as I say, I wasn't in a regular crew, so my numbers must have been kept someplace else, I don't know. But anyway, after 35, they said that was enough. And I was sent to 1st Air Division Headquarters as operations and training officer. And
that was back at Molesworth too?
No, that was up at France. There's a picture of the headquarters that I brought that you might see later.
Yes, yes.
And I was there at 1st Air Division Headquarters on special duty for a year about, I guess. And then at July of 1945, I was returned to the U.S. as part of a special project called the Honey Project, which was a group that was supposedly to go and set up Air Division headquarters like we had in Europe, out in the Philippines.
Right.
And we got as far as Santa Ana, California, and took all the shots and everything and ready to go, and they held it up. And then they dropped the bomb. So
Right.
we never did go.
God bless Harry Truman.
But we were still in this Honey Project, and although they were letting people out after
Yes.
that time.
You built up a lot of points by that time, hadn't
We
you?
had a lot of points, but I'm still in this Honey Project, and they couldn't get us out.
Sure. Let's take a look at a B-17 in flight and see if this shows up. This was taken from Major Dubell's aircraft by a photographer, of course, a trained photographer, and that's what the plane looked like in flight. And then we have another one. Oh yeah, you want to say something about this?
Well, this is the plane that shows
Yeah.
the rudder was shot off,
Oh yes.
and it still managed to fly and maneuver and
Right.
return to base.
Remarkable planes. They were so strong and so well built. Now, let's take a look at this photo here, which would be typical of the personnel, and show it. We got to tilt it like that. Is that okay? And that shows the 10-person crew of a B-17 Flying Fortress. You're looking over flight plans there, are you?
Evidently, I don't know.
It was a nice pose anyway.
I don't think I'm in that. I don't think this is the lead crew.
But that would show a typical situation of pre-flight or maybe even post-flight. After you came back from a mission, then you were interrogated, were you? And
Yeah, we had.
you had to impart what intelligence you found.
Yeah, they had what they called
Post.
post-flight interrogation, and intelligence officer or one of his group would sit with each crew and ask what the results were. Funny thing, I was watching the History Channel one night, and it showed this on the History Channel, and there I was in the picture smoking a cigarette.
How about that?
So I had a little exposure.
I should say, they should have had your name running across the bottom.
But
So you would be able to impart what damage you thought you caused.
right, and how much flak and
Right.
enemy aircraft,
Right.
when he shot down any aircraft, anybody injured in the flight, and more or less from each crew you could build up pretty much
Right.
scenario.
Such things as how did the enemy fly, kind of maneuvers that they performed to try and get at you and all that sort of thing.
Well, that was pretty well known before you went on that trip.
You were pretty well,
And,
well clued up. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that
And there were a lot of things happened at old Molesworth, the 303rd Bomb Group. It was well known. A lot of the action photos that you see in like the movie 12 O'Clock High
yes.
were taken from groups out of the 303rd Bomb Group. Clark Gable was there on one of those things and flew out of a plane on our field. We did have some of the USO people come, and Bob Hope and his girls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's that?
Doris Day.
No, she wasn't around
Oh, okay.
then. She,
Oh,
Frances Langford
Frances Langford. Oh, she was a beaut.
and a few others.
Yeah.
The King and Queen visited the base.
Oh, how nice.
And
Right. Right.
so
Well,
a lot of things happened.
now when you were
Interesting experience.
when and of course in the Navy we call it Liberty, but when you were back at the base, did you have any time off? Could you go to London or anything like that?
Oh, yes.
See the sights?
Well, we tried to get the crew off after so many missions that
Right.
they get 2 days off. I wasn't a crew, but I did get time off, and with my buddy from who was the group aviation officer, let's see what his job was. When we were up at 1st Air Division, we took a couple of trips, and I showed you a letter from how we helped the crowd.
Right.
And so, yeah, we did. I made a number of kind of trips on my own because I wasn't with the crew.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the old, what was it, Ely Cathedral?
Oh yeah, Ely Cathedral. Yeah.
And a number of different places.
Of course, by that time, London had been pretty devastated.
Well, I was down in London on many occasions when they were bombing
Were you
the
really?
B-2.
The Battle of Britain and so forth.
Yeah, you could feel the rockets
Oh my
coming
goodness.
down and
That was,
shake the place, and the dust and plaster be falling down, and
Sure.
you wondered, why did I come here, you know?
that was a terrible
It was
weapon,
in
wasn't it?
London, yeah.
That V2.
Well, the old little flying, what the hell they call those, would come over before the B-2.
Buzz bombs?
Buzz bombs, yeah. And the buzz bombs would come flying across the
Wow.
area. And of course, they made a noise. You knew they were flying. When they stopped making the noise, you thought, oh, they're coming down now.
Yeah, right. They come-
And down they would come. But
Oh, that's,
yeah, very, very many experiences.
well, I
that,
should say. And what percentage of your crews did not come back?
Well, and the first group that went over, I guess we must have lost, 30%
Good
in
heavens.
the first few flights.
Terrible.
But there was no fighter protection at
No
that
escort
time.
at all, yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
They say they thought we were going to get shot down. They took those little pictures of us, so
Yes.
in case we,
Yeah,
we got the friendly treatment, they could
right.
make.
Did you ever have any survivors of any of your squadron planes that went down that might have been prisoners of war?
We did have some, and a couple of them that were shot down that the underground picked up and took him through Italy and
My goodness.
and back, and he came back to the base.
Isn't that
And,
something? Came back to England?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Brought him back to England.
How about that?
And
You probably wish he could have been sent home instead of back to England.
well, he wanted me to see if the rest of the crew was there.
Oh, of course.
And we had a lot of different experiences.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's something that people have read about and seen on the History Channel and so forth, particularly stories like the Memphis Belle and so forth. The camaraderie and the interneting and interweaving of the personnel. You became like brothers, didn't you?
Oh, yes, and those crews were like family, you know,
Yes.
they stuck together. But there were many times when people asked, weren't you afraid, weren't you scared?
Right.
Well, kind of, but for some reason, I never thought anything was going to happen to me. I said, you better fly with me because they're not going to get us. And I think I had too many people praying for me back here. And
Yeah, you bet.
all that sort of stuff. But
Well,
I never was really that scared.
I understand how you felt.
But it was exciting, I'll say that.
Oh, yes.
And
You could have been called Lucky Dick.
well, they called me Tricky Dick.
Tricky Dick. Well, I like Lucky better. Tricky has a different connotation, but you obviously a fine leader and a manager of personnel, so to speak, and obviously your men were very devoted to you as a leader, and you talked about reunions, post-war reunions.
They, as I said, the 303rd Bomb Group was one of the leaders in this sort of thing, and for some reason when I came back, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to join VFW, all the other things.
Right.
I don't know if it was because it was my job to pick the guys that went on the missions, and they got shot down, and I'm still around.
I know.
But I just never hate the reunions, and I guess there was some psychological reason for that
Yeah.
because.
I know how you feel. I've
But
experienced that. Well,
I was very fortunate in that I just was picked at the right time to do the wrong thing or something, and got through it all.
well, the good Lord was looking upon you. As you say, you had a lot of prayers and lots of thoughts. As the war wound down, and as you said, after VE Day, which was in June or July of 45, you had prospects of having to go to the Pacific.
Well, I don't know at that time whether we were sent, I landed in the U.S. from Europe on July 4th, 1945.
Okay.
And
Great Independence Day.
yeah, and so I had 30 days at home, I guess, and then out to the West Coast and through Santa Ana. So when the bomb was dropped, we thought, well, everybody's going to go home.
Sure.
And but as I say, I was on that honey project, and for some reason they didn't want to let us go.
Why did they call it the Honey Project?
Somebody's honey money, I don't know.
Oh, I see. Okay. But
I have no idea why they called it.
was the prospect that you would be going over in B-17s again?
At that time, there was not an Air Force air headquarters, air division headquarters. The bombing that was being done in the Pacific was actually directed from the U.S.
Right.
And so they wanted to set up an air division headquarters which could direct the bombing, thinking that it was going to take some time over there with Japan and so on.
Right. Let's go back just a little bit. What about June the 6th, 1944? Normandy. Were you a part of that invasion?
I was. I flew I didn't want to miss it.
Yeah.
I had sent out the crews earlier, bomb crews, and then we decided that those that were able in the planes we would go a second mission that day, which was later in the afternoon. And I did go on that mission. So.
Well, were you able to see the landings and so forth?
Well, what was left of it, we were to bomb beyond the landing area.
Uh-huh.
And which we did. And I have a friend said that if you hadn't made the right bombing run, why we wouldn't have had to go in the Navy over there. But anyway.
Right.
I did go on a mission on
Was there any particular, getting back to 1945, the end of the war in Europe, was there any particular celebration that went on at that time? Did you guys have an extra pot of rum or something, or?
Oh, we had that every time. We, as I say, we were kind of different. We were in a different place.
Yes.
We were not with the same groups.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm fortunate, one of friends from the 303rd Bomb Group who went over with us, a guy named Jack Gardner, lived in Santa Ana, California. And while we were waiting to find out what was going to happen, I went down and visited with him.
Oh, you did?
And I stayed at his house for a while and checked the base to see what was going on. And so we did have a celebration when the bomb was dropped.
Of course.
But then the next was, what are they going to do with us? They wouldn't let us out. So they sent me to West Coast Training Command. And I had various duties the next few months.
By this time, had you attained the rank of lieutenant colonel?
No, I was a major at the
You were
time.
still a major.
And
Did you stay in the reserves after the war?
I'm in reserve, I guess, still. But when I came back, I wanted to continue flying, and they had a reserve unit down at Lincoln Airport.
Oh, yes.
And so I went down to join that so I could fly. And they said, well, we have a table of organization, and there's no room for another lieutenant colonel.
Oh, my God.
And if I
Dime a dozen.
if I wanted to fly, I had to go up to
Columbus?
Columbus or where's the other place where they?
Indiana?
No. But that was the story. So
Right.
I didn't take many trips there.
So did you keep your, were you able to keep your flight skins alive for a while?
Yes, I was fortunate enough. A fellow named Al Camello, and if you were back in the days when we were young, the Camello Tailoring Company had quite a few baseball teams, good baseball players. But he and I were good friends, and he went in the service about the same time and became a transport pilot for Air Corps. And when I came back, he was back in town, and he or the family owned a plane down at the Lincoln Airport.
Oh, yeah.
So to keep up flying, I'd go down with him, and we'd fly around and go here and there.
Terrific.
And
Well, so now at the end of the war, and you came back, Lincoln Airport was still the Cincinnati airport, wasn't it?
it was, yes.
And what?
Well, I flew out of Lincoln Airport on an American Airlines flight to California when I was in the service.
I'll be darned.
And if you look at the history of Lincoln Airport, you'll notice that American Airlines began at Cincinnati Lincoln Airport.
Indeed.
And so there's a lot of action was taking place. E.B. Lincoln had a couple of P-51s down there.
Right.
And
Did you, by any chance, did you know the Crosley brothers?
no, but my brother worked for Crossley, and
No kidding.
I certainly knew of them, but I didn't know them personally.
Right, I understand. Because
But I knew a lot of other personal groups,
yeah.
like the mayor and so on.
Oh, yeah. Who was the mayor at that time?
Jansen.
Was that Albert Cash or?
Cash was a mayor.
Yeah.
Earl Rich.
Stewart.
Way back.
Yeah. Well, that's just
Jansen.
amazing. There's a new book out, you know, about the Crosley brothers. It just came out, and everyone who's read it said it's just a wonderful book. I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet. Well, Dick, we're winding down here, and tell us about a little bit about your civilian life and your family.
Well, as you see, I'm still here. I was very fortunate in after returning to meet my wonderful wife. She also went to St. Mary's Church where I did, and at that time I'm still living on Edwards Road. And we eventually got together and got married in 1960. I have 3 children. Gina Dubell Smith, who is very prominent in real estate, a leader at Comey and Shepard Company.
Oh, yes.
And
good for you. That's great.
my wife was with Comey and Shepard before. Taught Gina to come into the business, and my son Richard is he went to the University of Dayton. He was an engineer, and he's with GE Jet Engine Division as an engineer.
Oh, yes.
And my other son, Steve, the younger one, went to Bowling Green State University, and He is in Salt Lake City, Utah. He's a builder, and so they're.
That's wonderful. What a great
So-
record and a great family.
They're all going to come down. The group from Salt Lake City are coming in next week and spend Christmas with us, and we'll have the whole family with.
Well, that's just great, and I'm so honored to have the opportunity to speak with you, and again, we thank Robin Warner here at the Madera Library. Oh, by the way, we didn't show these.
Speaking of family,
Speaking of family,
you have to tilt it a little.
yeah. Does that show up okay?
This is fine.
Well, this is his son right here. This is Steve.
No, that's Rick.
That's Rick. Okay, and here's your grandson.
Cole,
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful looking boy.
and he's a good ball player. And then General
General Metcalf.
Metcalf.
He's the head of the Air Force
The other
Museum.
guy was the, I don't know. He took
Curator or something?
Curator, that's
Yeah,
it, that's
yeah.
the name. And the volumes that you see here are the 303rd Bomb Group
Oh yes,
letters that are in the
in the archives. there.
archives and
And the museum.
at the Library of Congress.
Yes, right. Now this one here shows Shoo Shoo Baby.
And that's a general and Lieutenant Colonel and his wife,
And his
who is the general.
Right. She's the general in charge. Well, those are priceless, and you certainly are an honored citizen, a great American, and we thank you for your great service, and God bless you, and many more years to come, and I know that you'll have a very Merry Christmas with all your family here.
Oh, certainly shall. And,
Oh, I should
if
say.
the weather gets better, we'll go out and play golf.
Well,
I
there we
still
go.
play.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to the library.